Good evening, everyone. We all crave genuine connections. We want to feel seen, heard, and understood. But sometimes we find ourselves in relationships, whether personal or professional, where something feels off. The energy isn't quite right. There's a sense that what's being presented to us isn't the full picture. It's as if people are wearing masks and we can't quite figure out who they really are. Today, I want to talk about 7 signs that people are being totally fake with you. I know it's not always easy to spot these signs right away, especially when we desperately want to believe the best in others. But once you begin to notice them, you can start making better choices about who you invest your time and energy into. We all appreciate a sincere compliment. There's something about being recognized for our efforts, our appearance, or our qualities that feels good, right? But there's a subtle difference between a compliment that feels authentic and one that feels off. When someone constantly showers you with praise, but it feels too broad, too generalized, or oddly detached, it can be a sign that something isn't quite right. Maybe they're complimenting you in ways that don't feel personal to who you are or what you've actually done. For example, if someone tells you you're amazing, every time they see you, but there's no real acknowledgement of anything specific about you, your actions, your thoughts, your growth, it can start to feel like they're just saying what they think you want to hear. Or maybe they constantly tell you how great you look, but you don't ever feel like they really see you beyond the surface. These kinds of compliments can feel like they're meant to make you feel good on the surface, but they don't actually create any real connection. They may even make you wonder, do they actually know me? Or are they just throwing out words to keep the peace or maintain some kind of distance? True compliments come from a place of genuine observation, where someone recognizes something unique or meaningful about you. They reflect the essence of who you are, not just a surface level attempt to make you feel nice in the moment. If the compliments feel like empty pleasantries or scripted praise, it might be a sign that the person is more invested in keeping up an image than in seeing the real complex person standing before them. Words are incredibly powerful, but they only hold weight when they are backed by consistent actions. We all know that person who promises the world but rarely follows through. Maybe they say they'll help you with a project and then vanish when it's time to actually get to work. Or perhaps they tell you they value your friendship but never show up when you need them most. It's easy to dismiss these moments at first, to believe that everyone has their off days or that circumstances just got in the way. But over time, if the pattern continues, you begin to notice a disconnect between what they say and what they do. They may promise big things, help, support, commitment, but when it comes to actually showing up, those promises fall flat. This inconsistency is a huge red flag. Authenticity is built on trust, and trust is built on consistent, reliable actions. When someone's words don't align with their behavior, it suggests they may not be fully invested in the relationship, or worse, they may be more concerned with saying the right things to appear a certain way than actually following through. The inconsistency can manifest in small ways too, like offering advice one day and contradicting it the next, or acting one way in front of others and entirely differently when they think no one is watching. These contradictions begin to chip away at the foundation of trust, leaving you unsure of where you stand or whether you can depend on them when it matters most. Vulnerability is at the core of meaningful human connection. It's the willingness to open up, to share the parts of ourselves that aren't perfect, to expose the raw, messy, uncertain parts of our lives. It's through vulnerability that we truly see one another, but not everyone is willing to show up in this way. There are people who consistently avoid real vulnerability, who keep their emotions, struggles, and challenges carefully locked away. They might offer a polished version of themselves, one that never falters, never questions, and always seems to have everything under control. While there's nothing wrong with maintaining a sense of privacy, when someone repeatedly avoids any form of emotional honesty or depth, it can leave the relationship feeling shallow. These people might keep conversations light, always steering clear of topics that would require them to reveal anything real about themselves. They might steer the focus away from their own struggles, pretending that everything is always fine, even when it's clearly not. Over time, this avoidance creates a distance between you. It's as though there's an invisible wall that prevents you from connecting beyond the surface. They might share facts, opinions, or even jokes, but when it comes to showing their fears, their hopes, their doubts, or their weaknesses, they retreat. This can feel isolating. You may find yourself wondering if they trust you enough to let you in, or if they even trust themselves enough to be vulnerable with anyone. It's hard to truly know someone if they won't show you the parts of themselves that are imperfect and uncertain. Vulnerability is not a weakness, it's a strength. It's the courage to show up as your true self without the protective layers or the masks. When someone refuses to be vulnerable with you, it can feel like they're holding back a piece of who they are, creating a distance that makes it harder to build a deep, authentic connection. There's a tendency in all of us to want to appear perfect, to put forth our best selves to the world, especially when we're uncertain about how we'll be received. But when someone consistently presents themselves as flawless, whether it's in their appearance, their actions, or their life, it can start to feel like they're hiding something. The person who never admits to making mistakes, who never shares a moment of weakness or failure, is often the one who's working the hardest to maintain an image. The truth is, we all have our struggles. We all face moments where we don't quite measure up to our own expectations, let alone the expectations of others. And when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable in those moments, we create space for real connection. But some people feel an immense pressure to project an image of perfection, as though showing any sign of imperfection is a weakness or failure. This can show up in many forms: someone who never acknowledges their mistakes, someone who only shares their successes without mentioning the effort or setbacks that led to them, or someone who only lets you see the highlight reel of their life, never the behind-the-scenes reality. It's easy to get swept up in this curated version of perfection, to think that everything in their life is flawless. But if you look closely, you might begin to notice cracks in the facading, old things they're glossing over, the parts of their story they're leaving out. In many cases, this need for perfection comes from a place of deep insecurity or fear of being judged. The person might feel that if they show any vulnerability, any imperfection, they'll lose your approval or affection. And while it's natural to want to present our best selves, it's the raw, messy, real moments that allow us to truly connect with others. When someone is constantly trying to keep up an image of perfection, it can make you question whether you're seeing the real person or just the version of themselves they want you to believe in. People-pleasing can often be a subtle and insidious behavior. It shows up when someone is so focused on making others happy or gaining approval that they lose sight of their own needs, desires, and boundaries. At first glance, it might seem like kindness or generosity. After all, who doesn't appreciate someone who is thoughtful, accommodating, or eager to make you feel good? But when this behavior becomes constant, it can start to feel disingenuous. People who are caught up in people-pleasing might go out of their way to do things they don't actually want to do, or say things they don't truly believe just to keep the peace or to avoid conflict. They might agree with you even when they disagree, adjust their opinions to match yours, or take on more than they can handle just to avoid letting you down. While these actions may seem harmless at first, over time they create a false sense of connection. The relationship becomes less about the true person and more about the performance they're putting on in order to gain your approval. This kind of behavior often stems from deep-rooted insecurity. The fear of rejection or the desire to be liked can become so overwhelming that they suppress their true thoughts, feelings, and desires. You may find yourself wondering if this person is ever truly themselves around you, or if they're constantly adjusting, molding, and reshaping who they are to meet your expectations. People pleasing can also create an imbalance in relationships, where one person is constantly giving and the other is always receiving, without either party being truly seen or understood for who they are. When someone is always trying to please, it can leave you questioning whether they're genuinely showing up as themselves or simply trying to avoid discomfort. It's exhausting to constantly seek approval, and over time, it can leave both people feeling disconnected. True connection comes from the ability to be authentic with one another without the need to perform, without the fear of being judged or rejected. True relationships are built on the foundation of deep mutual understanding. It's not just about shared experiences or common interests. It's about really seeing and hearing one another, about creating space where both people can be fully themselves without fear of judgment. But sometimes we find ourselves in relationships where that connection is absent. It's like you're speaking, but they're not really listening. Or you're sharing something important and they nod along, but never ask any follow-up questions, never dive deeper into what you've said. The conversation stays at surface level, revolving around the weather, trivial news, or superficial topics. It can feel like they're more interested in the idea of being around you than in actually knowing you. They might show up physically, but emotionally or mentally, they're elsewhere. This lack of genuine connection can be especially painful because it's so hard to pinpoint. It doesn't feel like an outright rejection, but it leaves you feeling unseen, unheard, and unimportant. You begin to wonder if they really care about who you are, or if you're simply a convenience to fill a space in their life. Sometimes this lack of connection isn't intentional. It can stem from their own discomfort with vulnerability or their unwillingness to open up to others. But in the end, it leaves you feeling isolated. Authentic connection requires more than just sharing space or time together. It requires active engagement, curiosity, and a willingness to go beyond the surface. When someone isn't invested in understanding who you truly are, the relationship can feel shallow, transactional, and ultimately unsatisfying. And as much as you may want to reach out or engage, you start to realize that you're the only one putting in the effort. You can't build a meaningful connection with someone who isn't willing to meet you halfway, to ask the hard questions, to listen with the intent to understand rather than to respond. Emotions are a fundamental part of what makes us human. They are what color our experiences, what give depth and meaning to our relationships. But when someone is constantly detached from their emotions, when they avoid expressing any real feelings, whether it's joy, sadness, frustration, or excitement, it can create a barrier between you. Emotions are meant to be shared, to be felt, and to be acknowledged, especially in relationships where trust and intimacy are present. Yet some people, for various reasons, keep their emotional world locked away. They might avoid talking about how they feel, even when it's clear that something's weighing on them. They may react to stressful situations with detachment or indifference, as if nothing can faze them. They might tell you everything is fine even when it's not, leaving you with a sense that they are withholding a part of themselves. This emotional disconnection often leads to a relationship that feels one-sided or superficial. You may find yourself trying to connect, trying to reach out, but coming up against a wall of emotional distance. It's as if they're not fully present in the moment, not willing to engage with their own feelings, let alone share them with you. Sometimes this lack of emotional expression comes from fear of being judged, fear of being vulnerable, or fear of being rejected. But it can also stem from a deeper internal struggle where they have learned to suppress their emotions, thinking that showing any kind of vulnerability is a weakness or a burden. Regardless of the cause, the result is the same, a relationship that feels hollow. When emotions are disconnected, it's hard to build trust or closeness. You're left wondering whether the person you're interacting with is truly present with you, or if they're simply going through the motions, keeping their emotions locked up behind a facade. Excessive flattery or over-the-top praise often feels more like a performance than a genuine acknowledgement. When someone constantly heaps exaggerated compliments on you, it can quickly start to feel insincere. For instance, they might tell you how amazing you are in ways that don't align with your actual actions or achievements, almost as if they're reading from a script. Instead of specific praise for something you've done or a trait you possess, it's general and broad: you're the best, or you're absolutely incredible. These kinds of compliments are often aimed at boosting your ego, but they don't reflect anything real or meaningful about your relationship. It can feel like the person is trying to win you over or gain your favor by telling you exactly what they think you want to hear, rather than offering thoughtful or genuine feedback. Over time, this can erode trust. You begin to wonder if they're complimenting you because they actually see your value, or if they're doing it because they have an agenda. This kind of excessive praise may also make you feel uncomfortable, as it doesn't seem to match your experience or the reality of the situation. You may start to question the person's true intentions, especially if their compliments feel out of proportion with the context. Instead of building a real connection, it can feel like they're just playing a part, trying to create an illusion of closeness without actually investing in the relationship. A lack of accountability is a significant sign that someone is not being genuine with you. People who avoid taking responsibility for their actions often deflect blame or refuse to acknowledge their role in a situation, no matter how clear it might be. When mistakes are made, they might point fingers at others, make excuses, or act like nothing went wrong at all. This can be especially frustrating in relationships, as it creates a sense of imbalance. It's hard to build trust when someone can't own up to their actions, admit when they've hurt you, or even apologize when necessary. Instead of acknowledging their behavior and trying to make amends, they might minimize the issue, downplay its significance, or simply deny that anything is wrong. Over time, this lack of accountability can wear down your patience and leave you feeling like you're the only one who is responsible for keeping things together. It can create a dynamic where you're constantly left to clean up the mess or deal with the fallout of their actions while they remain unaffected and unbothered. Genuine relationships are built on mutual respect and the ability to own up to one's mistakes. Without accountability, however, there's no growth, no learning, and no room for real change. It's exhausting to be in a relationship where accountability is constantly avoided, because you start to question whether the person is even capable of being honest with themselves, let alone with you. When someone always agrees with you, it can initially feel like a sign of harmony or camaraderie. However, if this agreement is constant and never challenged, it can start to feel disingenuous. People who always agree with you, no matter what you say may be doing, so not because they genuinely share your views, but because they are trying to please you or avoid conflict. They might laugh at all your jokes, nod in agreement with every opinion you express, or tell you that you're right even when your ideas aren't fully thought out. This kind of behavior often signals that they are not truly engaging with your thoughts or perspectives in a meaningful way. Instead of contributing their own opinions, they're simply echoing yours, which can create a one-sided, superficial interaction. It can also leave you feeling like your relationship lacks depth, because real connections involve an exchange of ideas, even when those ideas are different. When someone never offers a differing opinion, it can make you wonder if they're simply trying to keep the peace or if they're afraid to share their true thoughts. This avoidance of honest conversation in favor of always agreeing often reflects insecurity or a lack of comfort in expressing oneself authentically. Genuine relationships thrive on honest communication, where differing opinions can lead to growth and understanding. But when someone always agrees with you, it's hard to know if they're truly seeing you or if they're simply saying what they think you want to hear. Avoiding conflict or tough conversations can be a subtle yet powerful sign that someone is not being authentic with you. While it's natural to want to avoid discomfort, some people take this to an extreme, steering clear of any conversation that might cause tension or require vulnerability. They might brush off serious issues with humor, change the subject when something important comes up, or offer vague reassurances instead of engaging in a deeper discussion. When they consistently avoid addressing difficult topics, it creates a barrier to real connection. Conflict, though challenging, is often necessary for growth in any relationship. It's in those moments of tension that we learn more about each other's values, boundaries, and needs. But when someone is unwilling to confront any disagreement or emotional challenge, it can feel like they're not fully present in the relationship. They may fear confrontation, worry about being judged, or simply not want to deal with the discomfort of vulnerability. Over time, this avoidance can leave you feeling like you're walking on eggshells, never able to address important matters or speak your truth. It can also lead to unresolved issues festering beneath the surface, creating unspoken resentment or confusion. Without the ability to have tough conversations, the relationship stays in a superficial space, never growing into something deeper or more meaningful. People who avoid conflict often do so to protect themselves, but in the process, they prevent real connection from taking place. And as much as you may try to bring up important topics, you start to wonder if they're unwilling to confront their own discomfort, or if they simply don't value the relationship enough to face the hard things together. Inconsistent interest in your life is a subtle but telling sign that someone might not be fully invested in the relationship. Initially, they may seem genuinely engaged, asking about your day, your thoughts, and your plans. They might even offer their support or celebrate your achievements, but then as time goes on, you start to notice that their curiosity about your life fluctuates. One day they're deeply involved, asking all the right questions and showing excitement about your experiences, but the next they seem distracted, indifferent, or completely disengaged. This inconsistency can be confusing, leaving you uncertain about their true feelings or intentions. When someone shows interest in your life only when it's convenient or when it benefits them, it creates a sense of imbalance. You might start to feel like you're the one putting in all the effort to keep the connection alive, while they simply take what they need in the moment. It can also leave you questioning whether they really care about you, or if they're only invested when it serves their own needs. Perhaps they ask about your week, but when you share something significant, their attention seems to drift, or they quickly change the subject. Or they may reach out when it's convenient for them, but when you need their support or want to connect, they're suddenly unavailable. This lack of consistent engagement can feel isolating, as it becomes harder to determine whether you're truly seen or valued. Relationships require reciprocity, where both people show a genuine and consistent interest in each other's lives. When someone only seems to care intermittently, it can feel like you're giving your time and energy to someone who isn't truly present. In the end, authentic relationships are built on trust, vulnerability, and mutual respect. When we encounter signs of inauthenticity, whether it's excessive flattery, inconsistency, a lack of vulnerability, perfectionism, people-pleasing, disengagement, or emotional disconnection, it's essential to pause and reflect. These behaviors often signal that the person is more focused on presenting a curated version of themselves rather than showing up as their true, imperfect self. It's easy to get caught up in the surface level interactions that make us feel comfortable or validated, but real connection requires us to be honest, to take responsibility, and to be willing to engage with the messy parts of ourselves and each other. If you're experiencing any of these signs, it's an opportunity to take a step back and assess whether you're being valued for who you truly are, or whether the relationship is built on an illusion. True connection comes from the courage to be real, to acknowledge our imperfections, and to show up as we are, not as we think others want us to be. And when both people are willing to do this, that's when the deepest, most meaningful relationships are born. So let's aim to show up with authenticity, to encourage others to do the same, and to create spaces where we can be seen and heard, not for what we pretend to be, but for who we truly are. Thank you.